Good morning and welcome to Mother's Day at Living Waters Church. You know, a couple of years ago, I was at the park with my extended family and my dad had taken my 2-year-old niece and put her up on this wall and was encouraging her to jump down to him. And she was scared and she wouldn't jump. But her father came up at that time and put his arms out and she instantly jumped down into his arms. Why? Because she trusted him with her entire being. It's not that she didn't trust her grandfather, but her level of trust with her dad was totally different. She knew that she was safe with him. Today's lesson from the wilderness is all about trust. Now I want to read to you from Exodus 16, and it's quite a long reading, so just hang in here with me. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they'd come out of Egypt. They'd been walking around for about 6 weeks at this stage. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are going to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." So Moses and Aaron and all of the Israelites said to all of the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against us. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You're not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked into the desert, and there the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight that you will have meat to eat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost lay on the ground and appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is this?" Because they didn't know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." The Israelites did what they were told. Some gathered much, some gathered little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who had gathered much did not have too much, and the one that gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses, and they kept part of it till morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry at them. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person. And the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to him, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be the day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save what is left and keep it till the morning." So they saved it till the morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath, and that is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the 7th day. The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made of honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law, so that it might be preserved. The Israelites ate manna 40 years, until they came to the land that was settled, and they ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. You know, so often on Mother's Day, we talk about lovely verses about what it means to be a Christian mother. Today, I want to use this story as a bouncing board to make us think through what life is like when our families are in a wilderness. I don't know about you, but often when I think about the Israelites coming through the wilderness, I forget that there are children there. I hear the people of Israel grumbled, and I think about lots of discontented adults mourning what they had left in Egypt. And yet this is the whole nation of Israel: men, women, and children. Now think about that for a moment. Parents, your children are hungry and you have no food. Grandparents, your grandchildren are hungry and you can't help them. You're watching your own children struggle to feed their children, and it breaks your heart. You're frustrated. They need food and you can't do anything about it. And you lash out at those in charge. You know, most parents would struggle to go through would prefer to go through a hard time themselves than watch their children struggle. And I've talked to people and I've listened to your hearts break because you've watched your children going through their own wilderness times. It was exactly the same for these parents. Imagine with me for a moment how excited they must have been when Moses said that God was going to provide meat and manna for your family. And Moses gave these instructions. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. 1 omer. That's so specific. An omer is 9.3 cups of manna for each person. It's a little bit under 2.5 kilos. Have you ever wondered why God was so specific in this instruction? You know, when we look at what's happened in grocery shops throughout the world in the last couple of months, we can see why God was making sure that there was plenty of manna for people to go around. Because there's 2 real reasons here. First of all, if you don't be very, very specific like that, there are going to be some people that are going to go out and try and profiteer from it. And we've seen it where people have gone in and they have bought massive amounts of toilet paper and hand sanitizer with the intent to sell at an increased rate to other people later on. You know, one person in Australia recently tried to return 150 packs of 32 rolls of toilet paper and 150 bottles of hand sanitizer. There's no way he ever needed that much. He bought it simply to make money. But what he found was that he couldn't sell it. And so then he tried to take it back to the supermarket. People like him cause the panic, and then they try and profiteer from it. But there's a second reason why people might gather too much. Because they were worried about their family. I know that manna is here today, but what about tomorrow? I need to have enough food to feed my kids tomorrow as well as today. And so the temptation is to gather more than I need for today and to set it aside. Put it in today's terms. I know that there's toilet paper in the shop today, but there may not be tomorrow. I know that there's rice or flour or pasta in the shop today, but what if there's not the next time I come shopping? So I'll just get a little bit extra. The shops kept telling us it was fine. We've got the food. There's food in and toilet paper in our reserves. That wasn't the problem. The food shortage didn't come, and the toilet paper shortage didn't come because of the supply lines. They came because the people didn't trust the grocery stores to be able to provide them, and they started hoarding. God had given plenty of manna for everybody to enjoy. And I love the way that they describe it here. The Israelites did what they were told. Some gathered a lot, some gathered a little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much had not gathered too much. And the one who gathered little had not gathered too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Don't you wish that could have happened here before lockdown? People only get as much as they needed. But of course the story doesn't end there. Moses said to them, don't keep any of it till morning. But some people just couldn't do that. They ate that day and then they went, we need to store this little bit away for tomorrow, because what do we do if there's no manna on the ground tomorrow? But storing it overnight didn't help. God was determined that they were going to learn to trust him to supply their daily needs, day by day. There weren't going to be leftovers. The leftovers started to stink and had maggots all through it. Why? Because God was teaching the Israelites two things. You need to learn to trust, and you need to learn to obey. Trust me to provide your needs, and obey me when I tell you how to do things. The end of the week comes and God says to the Israelites on the sixth day that they're to gather enough manna for 2 days, because there's not going to be any new manna on the Sabbath. So they do that and they cook it up and they store it, and it stores overnight. But the next morning, some people went out to see whether there was any manna there on the ground, even though they'd been told that there wouldn't be. Had they failed to collect enough the day before? Or were they just trying to get that little bit extra? As I've been pondering these verses this week, I started to think about trust. How do we learn to trust someone? You learn to trust someone because time after time they proved to be trustworthy. I never thought to question whether there was going to be food on my plate when I was a child, because every single meal my mother would place a plate of food on the table in front of me. But what about the children who that's not true for? Children who don't get regular meals. The first day God provided the manna, the Israelites were grateful, but they had to trust him to do it again. And he did it the next day and the next day and the next day. And I'm sure after a year of getting the manna 5 days a week, 6 days a week, it's 5 days a week, and then a double portion on the Sabbath, the Israelites stopped questioning whether they could trust God to provide their food. They'd seen him do it time and time and time again. So a year into their journey, they woke up with the expectation that God was going to have the manna on the ground there ready for them to collect. 39 years in, they wake up trusting that God is going to put the manna on the ground for them to collect in the morning. seen him do it so many times. They had their bit to do. They had to get up and go out of their tent and collect it. But they knew it would be there waiting for them. They didn't provide the manna. God did. And I come back to the fact that it's Mother's Day. What can we learn about life through this event? You know, I started by saying that parents find it hard to watch their children struggle. Here's my question for you. Do you trust God with your family? You know, ultimately, that is the question that God was asking the Israelites. Will you trust me to provide for your children and your grandchildren? When everything is going well for my kids, it's easy to say, I trust them to God. But what about when they're struggling? What about when they're sick? What about when they're in the middle of a domestic violence situation? Or a divorce? Or a custody battle? Or they're unemployed or doing drugs? Or whatever your child's wilderness may look like at this time. Can I trust them to God in those times? Psalm 62 verse 8 says, trust in him at all times. O people, pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Trust in God at all times, not just the good times. But the problem is that sometimes as a mother, I don't want God to take my children through the wilderness. I don't want them to have to go and learn to trust him. I want them to remain safe and protected and well fed. I don't want them to have to struggle. And when I see them going through something like that, the temptation is to step in and take God's place and want to provide everything that they're going to need or want at that time. It's a bit like having a tent in the middle of the Israelites' enclosure and giving hamburgers out to all the people that are around me. You don't need to trust God. You don't need to go out and get your manna. Here, I can do this. But the only way that the Israelites, man, woman, and child, learnt to trust God was by going through that wilderness and collecting the manna that he placed there day by day. The psalmist is right. We need to trust God in all circumstances, in the deserts of life and its beautiful oases. We need to trust him for ourselves, but also for our families. You know, the second part of this verse is very pertinent to parents and grandparents whose children are going through tough times. It says, pour out your hearts before him. Take your fears. Take your grief. Take everything that is going on inside of you and pour it out to God. He cares for your child and he cares for you. He knows what it is like to be sorrowing, watching a child go through a tough time. And right at the end, it says, he will be your refuge. God is going to be your refuge for you and your children. Let's pray. Lord, on this Mother's Day, we recognize that there are lots of mothers that are doing it tough, that may be estranged from their children, that may be far away from their children, or if their kids are going through their own tough times with illness, whatever it is. I encourage you just to pour your heart out to God now for your situation. Lord, we lift these up to you. And Lord, we are going to say that just as you provided the manna for the children of Israel, that you will provide our needs for us today. We thank you, Lord. Help us to trust and obey you at all times. Amen.